Hello, fellow bytecoders. Today, we're going to be talking about recursion. And in this video series of Python quick tips, we'll be having little videos like this where we can talk about, quick tips about, some programmers that have, troubles with dealing with. And one of these topics is recursion. I did talk about recursion in one of my tutorial videos, but I felt like I didn't explain it that well in depth, so I decided to make its own little video for that. So here we are. Now, recursion. A lot of people don't like using recursion. First of all, it takes memory to do recursion. Actually, before I even get into the detail of it, let me explain what recursion is. Recursion is just calling a method of itself, in its own self. What I mean by that, I mean, let's say I make a method. I call it method 1. It prints, let's say it prints a statement. It doesn't really matter. How about we just put hello or something? Or no, let's put like, I don't know, it could be anything, right? It could be gibberish if you wanted to. And then let's call the method here. We see that when we run this, I did not spell it right. My bad. That's on me. You can see that it runs once, right? Well, what happens if we call the method itself in its own method, right? So if we run that, the theory of this should be that once I call this method, it's going to run here. It is going to print this line. Then it's going to call its own self to do something, right? Well, it's very simple. What's going to happen here is going to run infinite amount of times until it runs out of memory. And that's exactly what just happened here. You can see that it says maximum recursion depth exceeded while calling a Python object. In other words, it basically ran out of memory and it started to print all this like X amount of times. I believe the limit in Python by default is probably 1000 or 2000. It's probably 1000 since it repeated 992 times, right? But that's the basic idea of what recursion is, calling its own self in its own method, right? But the thing about recursion is that it could be situational. Sometimes it'd be good to use recursion, sometimes it doesn't. The first, obviously, is that it runs out of memory pretty quickly, right? Unlike a loop, which is much better because it's an iterable value that is very controlled, that you can control it. Other than recursion, where maybe you left a bug in your code that you accidentally left the method being called in its own method and nothing to break out of it, then you'll run out of memory, and then your code just gives you this bug. It's very situational how you use it. The way I use it is only on controlled area. Like, let's say, for example, let me give you this example. The way I would use it would be in this scenario. Let's say I'm getting an answer, right? That does not set answer. Answer, right? Of an input of a question. Let's call this question, are you free tomorrow? Right? If we ask this question, it's going to be an answer. And whatever answer is, I want to do something with it. Like, let's say answer back, right? So I can just do a quick if statement here. If answer, my goodness, I cannot spell today, equals to yes, then I want you to print, cool. We will hang out then, right? However, let's say the user doesn't put yes or put some other word there. What I could do is I could just call its own method itself, and then we could just run it. Once we run it, are you free tomorrow? Let's say I put in blah, 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 blah. You see that it keeps asking that question, right? But at some point, there will be some limit. Now, I don't want to keep doing this because, it's going to take forever to get there. But at some point, it's going to reach to 1,000 asked questions, and it's going to run out of memory because each time I don't put an answer that's relative to the answer, it's storing memory. Every time I don't put it, it's storing this statement every time. And you don't really want that in your code because that could lead to a lot of bugs. But sometimes, for people that are making projects that know that it's not going to take their whole it's not going to take a lot of memory to do, then that's when you can use recursion because it can be faster and more simple and more easier to read visually. Other than when you use loops, for example. Like for example, like here, we can keep asking the questions. Let's say they didn't put no, or they could put capital yes, and they just put yes. Then you can, answer that question. But in more ideal situations, in not running out of memory and not running infinitely, or I'm sorry, and not running memory to like ruin your program, this is where in this instance you can use while loops. Let me give you another example, which is just going to be doing the same thing but with a loop. We'll call it method 2. And basically it's going to be the same thing. But this time we're going to use a while loop. While true, answer equal, let me just copy this. Just like that. While answer equals true, while answer equals whatever the input is, then we're asking an if statement. If the answer is yes, then let's hang out. And really simple, in order to break out this loop, we return false. Else, then we don't really do anything. We don't need to put an else, really. We could just let it run. So now if we just put method 2, run that. Are you free tomorrow? Are you free tomorrow? Are you free tomorrow? It's going to keep asking the same question. But it's the same idea. It's the same thing. They both do the same thing, but visually to me, the the recursion is an easier way to identify what's going on here. While the loop method here, it is easier to understand, but to me, visually appealing, the recursion is better for me to use. But like I said, recursion is used mainly on depending on the scenario that you're at. Remember that it does require memory to use, and it could be kind of hard to understand or implement in your program. Just be wary of that. And with that, this is the end of the video. Hopefully, this video taught you or helped you learn more about recursions than I did last time. If you like what you're watching, make sure to like and subscribe. We're going to be doing streams, me and Adam, every Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time as well. And with that, I am Josh, and I'll see you guys in the next video.